Thank you for the invitation. As Tom said, I wish I could be there in person, but that is not always possible. And as mentioned, I am the Business Opportunity Manager in Ocean Hyway Cluster. And today I will tell you a bit about us and the area that we are focused on, which is hydrogen-based fuels in the maritime sector. And I know this conference addresses the ocean industries, but many of you are maybe not very familiar to hydrogen. So therefore, I will start to give a brief introduction to hydrogen and then give a short status of the developments and finally look a bit further on. So who are we? And as I said, we're a Norwegian cluster working with hydrogen-based fuels in the maritime sector. And on this slide, you can see our members. It's a mix of companies from across the value chain, also finance, public sector, research, etc. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because if you are working with innovation, like hydrogen really is, you are dependent on collaboration between different actors. And that's kind of why companies form clusters, because they know that something like this is difficult to do alone. And a cluster works in many ways, and I won't spend much time going into this. You can see the slide what our activities is. But I want to mention one of the most important areas, and that is project activities and networking. Because if you want to pursue an opportunity within hydrogen or other renewable energy forms for that matter, you will need other actors. Because this is a completely different ballgame than with conventional fuels. Because not only is the technology different, but we also see that the business models are different. So what we as a cluster is trying to do is kind of bring these different actors together to coordinate and facilitate, but also provide up-to-date information on the market, on technology, so that the cluster's members together can drive this forward. And I also want to highlight my very good colleagues. And what makes us a bit different than many clusters is that we have a very strong focus on the technical side. And we have our own technical team with engineers. And that is because we see that our members, even large companies with vast maritime experience, have a lot of technical questions when it comes to hydrogen. And so we see that technical assistance is very important for us to offer to our members. And then I promised you a little introduction to hydrogen. And then we need to start with the basics. And I'm sorry if this was covered in the last presentation, but I didn't manage to see it. But as you all know, it's really all hands on deck now to achieve the climate targets. And hydrogen can be one of the solutions that could have a great impact here. And that is mainly because hydrogen is without carbon. And that must be the main goal at this stage, to not emit more carbon to the atmosphere. That's number one. And I just want to make it clear from the start that hydrogen is an energy carrier, not an energy source like solar, wind, etc. And you can use it in a fuel cell to generate electricity, and the only emission will then be water. But you can also use it directly in a modified combustion engine, for example, a hydrogen or ammonia engine, which is probably more familiar to most people. And the really big advantage with hydrogen is that it can be stored and transported. Because the challenge with most renewable sources is they can't really be stored in large quantities. And hydrogen makes this possible, meaning it can serve as some sort of battery. And on that note, I want to touch upon the discussion on batteries versus hydrogen. I know this is kind of a simplified picture, but you know what I mean. And we often hear that many treat them like competitors, which is absolutely not the case, because energy is not something we can afford to waste. And with that, I mean that if you have a vessel that can operate on only batteries, you should choose batteries, because then you get 100% efficiency. However, if the vessel requires high speed over a long period of time, a battery won't be able to handle that. And then hydrogen can be a good option. And I think you might have touched upon this earlier, but when it comes to the sustainability, the production method is very important. So depending on the type of production used, different colors are assigned. And at present, grey hydrogen is mainly produced by reforming natural gas, and that's used for industrial applications. And that releases a lot of CO2 and is not really environmentally friendly. So all hydrogen is not necessarily good hydrogen. And the term blue hydrogen is basically the same as grey, but now the CO2 is captured and stored. And then we have green hydrogen, which means it's produced from renewable energy sources with electrolysis. And that is completely emission-free. And the only byproduct here will be oxygen and heat, which you again can use to other applications. And for example, in our cluster, we have a company that's looking at using the oxygen and the heat for a nearby fish farm, a land-based fish farm, because that's something they need. And that would improve the business case around hydrogen, increase the efficiency, which is by many seen as an issue. And there are, of course, many other colors depending on how they are produced, but these are kind of the three that the main ones. And then the last thing I want to mention here is the handling of the hydrogen, meaning how you can store and transport it, because that could be done in many ways, and it really impacts how you can use the hydrogen, in what kind of vessel, what kind of distance. And the first we have is compressed hydrogen, which means it's pressurized. And then we have liquid hydrogen, which means it needs to be cooled down to over 250 degrees. And you can imagine that has its challenges, but on the other hand, it's much more energy dense. So you can get more hydrogen in a vessel and you would be able to go further. And then we have ammonia, which is getting quite a lot of attention these days. And that has many advantages to the regular hydrogen, but it's toxic and therefore need to be handled with care. And there are other interesting options as well, but I don't want to go into this because these three are the kind of the most common. And it's still a lot of research in all of these, so it's a bit too early to kind of conclude on which will be the most predominant one. So probably it will be a combination. And that was just a quick little intro. Now I want to give you a little status on where we are in the development as we see it from the cluster. And as probably all of you know, hydrogen is receiving a lot of attention these days. Many countries have released ambitious hydrogen strategies and roadmaps. We also see a lot of initiatives from the EU over the past years. And one of the latest is Fit for 55, which you probably heard of, which aim to reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030, which is a quite ambitious goal. And what's common for many of these initiatives from the EU is that hydrogen has been detected to play a significant role. And this is important because as a vessel owner, you are encouraged to make this first move towards a more sustainable future. But that requires predictability because this is per now pretty expensive. And as a ship owner, you want to be certain that you are betting on the right horse. And therefore, the governments and the political unions, such as the EU, are important. And we do need these ambitious strategies, but even more importantly, we need that they are backed with actions that can help us go further. Because we see that the maritime sector is ready and there are numerous projects going on. But then we can ask ourselves, where are they? With all this positive drive and all these ongoing projects, we are hardly seeing any hydrogen fuel ship on the water. Why is that? Because there are already a range of technologies out there. Some are more mature than others, and many of them are available or soon to be available. But what's common for them is most of them have not been tested in a vessel. And that's why it's so important to get these vessels on the water, these pilots, so that we can start testing how the technology actually works in a maritime environment. And the same goes for rules and regulations. because at the moment it's very challenging to build a hydrogen vessel because there are really no rules and regulations that specifically go for hydrogen. But the thing is that it's really too soon, because regulations can be an obstacle for innovation. And there are yet so many innovations to be done in this area that the authorities would need the experience gained from real life projects in order to develop them. So what's the next step? And based on my last slide, you probably understood that we believe that piloting is very important. We need to get the vessels on the water and start testing the technology. But that is not enough. To make hydrogen-based fuels a viable option, we need infrastructure. And to make hydrogen commercially sustainable, we need to produce at a large volume, meaning we need to scale up to reduce the cost. And since I'm here today representing a Norwegian cluster, it's closest to me to use a Norwegian example. What are we doing in Norway? And like many other countries, we have a hydrogen strategy and we have a roadmap. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that's really not enough. We need to back it up with action because private companies can't really do this on their own. And the last couple of months in Norway, we've seen some really positive notes when it comes to this. And I just want to mention a few examples. This one, earlier this month, a project that we are involved with received almost 9 million euros from the government to set up an ammonia bunkering terminal. And that kind of goes straight to the core, because setting up an infrastructure and bunkering solutions for ammonia fuels for ships. And this is a consortium that really has the strength to do this, but they need financial help to develop it. And now the government is helping them going in. And by doing this, they are kind of reducing the chicken and egg situation that we are always talking about when it comes to LNG, when it comes to hydrogen. And another one, we've been waiting a long time for this, is support to set up hydrogen production. Because until now, there has been no funding for the actual production facility. And that's pretty expensive to set up. But recently it was announced a competition where a few, probably 3 or 4 hydrogen hubs in Norway, will get a large grant to help set up a production facility for green hydrogen. And again, this is kind of tackling the chicken and egg issue. And this will make it easier for ship owner to take the leap, knowing that there will be a functioning infrastructure if I choose to run my vessel on hydrogen-based fuels. And these are examples of gaps that we see are getting filled now, because we've had numerous planned vessels over the years. But the problem is that they often stop at the drawing board. And there's over 100 vessel projects. And really, it's quite natural because not many people dare to build a vessel if you're not sure if you'll be able to fuel it. So I think we're lucky to have a government who now seems to support this. And then, of course, we as a cluster have to do our job to kind of link these together so that the infrastructure project and the end users are a good match. And that's also important. And when it comes to the hydrogen family, as we like to call it, it's pretty global. And we are all working towards the same goal, meaning that if we have advancements in one country, regardless of which one it is, it will benefit others. So it's exciting times ahead. And based on the last couple of years, I only think we will see great progress in the coming years. And that was what I wanted to say. But I want to leave you with a slide about our yearly conference coming up later this month. In a month. It's digital and it's free, so you can visit the conference website if you want more information. So thank you.